All right. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Kadash. Double honors to apostles and angels of great men stoned over well. Citation to the whole full elect that are scattered in the four corners of the earth. And all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Kadash. All right. First and foremost, this is a short lesson, all right, in which you see in the background is an update on Guyana and its digital ID. And it says Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Anil Nandalal, SC, has warned that businesses that refuse to accept Guyana's new digital identification card are in violation of the law. This comments follows a complaint that a local bank on Tuesday refused to recognize the newly introduced digital ID card, even though the law bringing it into force has already taken effect. According to the Attorney General, any entity that refused to accept the card is acting on breach of the law. He noted that the legislation provides for consequences for a penal nature where there is non-compliance with it. Provisions articulately those that give the card its legal authority. All right, so we're gonna go into the video and we're gonna touch the scriptures. All right, because really and truly, what this is just the beginning stages before they implement the MOTB, aka the microchip, aka the mark of the beast. All right, as a substitute. All right, for what they're really uh, uh, putting for right now, the card, which has a unique ID number. So we'll go into what he says, and then we'll go into the scriptures. All right.
The law says that the card is a sufficient and lawful form of identification to conduct any business.
All right. So basically, you see, the world is beginning to head towards for enforcing what this digital ID. You look at Canada, you look at in the UK, India, China is already they're already on board with it, and they're doing well, most of their cities are on the using digital identification and also transaction of business by currency. All right, almost everything, I think, if not almost everything, is basically done digitally. All right, now Guyana, along with Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad, and many other countries, are now beginning to set the pace to get this agenda going. And we all know by now that the Edomites are the head really that are setting up these unrighteous decrees, and all these nations that have went into bed with her, that have drunken of her wine of unrighteous decrees. All right, on unrighteous decrees. All right, to be drunken by it. All right, they're all in what should say in togetherness against us, the so-called Negro, Hispanic, and Native Indians. Their agenda basically is to keep us in that bondage. All right. Now let's get into it, and you know,
So here, the law says that the card is a sufficient and lawful form of identification to conduct any business, both in person and online, that requires the use of a form of identification. And it applies within territorial Guyana to both the public sector and to private entities. It has extraterritorial effect as well in relation to countries with which Guyana may at some stage execute some type of agreement with. So the agency or entity that refused to use the card is violating the act. And I am sure that in the act itself, there are consequences of a penal nature that flow when there is non-compliance with any provisions of the act, in particular, this provision of the act, because this is the pivotal provision in the law that activates the legal character of the card as a form of national identification.
AG, finally, can you say we've received similar complaints about the digital ID card? And what happens if you continue to receive this level of pushback or non-acceptance?
Then, so to answer your first question, no, you are the first complainant. I have not received any other report of such non-compliance. If there continues to be non-compliance, then the police force will have to be informed and be directed to ensure that the law is complied with.
Guyana is not.
All right, so let me get to a couple of precepts. All right, so basically they were saying, so if you don't basically take the digital ID, all right, or you're not in league with what they have set up, they're basically gonna alert the authorities, basically red flag you, all right, as a threat to society. That's what they're basically saying. All right, so the digital ID, all right, is going to be used in a form to do business transaction and so forth. That's not the problem. The problem is when they implement the MOTB to becomes mandatory. That's where you cut all ties with them. All right, cut all ties with them. All right, because that, according to the scripture, Revelation 13 and verse 16, which we will get into. All right, the Lord has decreed unto us not to take that. All right, because if we do partake of such abomination, guess what? Revelation 14 and 9 onward down tell us what will be the repercussion of our actions, which will be what? Torments, woes, and death, and even terminal nuclear fire, and with the laser beam that come out of the chariot, great torments. This is Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 6. It says, verse 5, it says, trust in Yahweh with all thine heart and lean not to thine own understanding. All right, so you got to go into the scriptures, all right, get the understanding of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, these prophecies, what they entail, what they unfold, all right, in order to understand the time that we're in, all right, and it says trust in Yahweh, because the time we'll be getting into when things begins to wax worse, all right, the Lord is going to continue to provide for us like he provides for us every day, all right. We don't have to study how we're going to eat, what we're going to drink, how we're going to get by in society. The Lord had already said, he said it, my servant shall eat. All right, my servant shall eat. All right. We're gonna be rejoicing. All right. And though we go through the hardship and the tribulations that we're about to suffer, all right, guess what? There's a great reward for us, as the scripture had foretold, man. There's a great reward for us. All right, immortality. All right, everlasting crown, righteousness. Our children will never die. All right, giving Yahweh Bashem Yahushai the glory and the honor and the praises first and foremost. Seeing our children grow. All right, seeing the recompense of our enemies, starting with what the Edomites, and these are the nations that are joint ears with them. All right, we're gonna see the greatness of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai and the kingdom that he's about to build. All right, but we understand that the MOTB has to become mandatory force. All right, and then these prophecies unfold, and eventually World War III. All right, verse 6: in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. Be not wise in thine own eyes, fear Yahweh, and depart from evil. All right, because trusting in this man's society, all right, is going to give you what? That destruction. all right, you're gonna be destroyed. All right. So what you got to do by gradualism, all right, you basically get rid of the things that hold ties to this society. All right. Meaning what? Um, you only deal with basically what you need to deal with day to day. All right. Don't get caught up into so much material and vanity in this world. All right, buying a whole lot of vehicles, buying a lot of properties and all these things, thinking that this place is going to continue is only going to bring your destruction. So what you do, you trust in Yahweh Shem Yahushai, you go about your daily needs, and you give thanks and praise to Yahweh Shem Yahushai, and you look to Yahweh Shem Yahushai to guide you within the times that you're in. All right, so let me get an next precept. All right, all right, right, Micah 2:1. Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hands. And we're seeing that the elites, all right, the Edomites are putting down these agendas, all right, and what these ambassadors that are set up for the heathens, for Babylon, for Esau Edom, all right, because Babylon, all right, America, all right, she's the one that's basically pushing, all right, these agendas out according to prophecies. For all nations are drinking of our wine. All right. And we're seeing America and Guyana. Guyana has a strong influence. America, Slovakia, has a strong influence in Guyana. All right. And a lot of things that were not visible within many years before are now made visible through the scriptures. You got Elon Musk has what do you call uh internet, I believe it's in kind of like a satellite that we Guyana feeds off of the internet and provides us. I think it's Starlink. All right, and Starlink is going to be used as one of the major areas where they're going to do that digital tracking. All right, so they want to sync everything, you know, the driver's license, um, the way you do driver's license, medical, where you eat, where you bank, everything they need to know about you to keep you accounted for within that digital world. All right. All right. Let me get the next precept. And through that, they're gonna be they're gonna be a lot of sedition. All right. So like they're gonna be a lot of military setup. That they're gonna screen you as you go by to see if you have that digital ID. How much more the MOTB. All right, great death and great woes. This is 2nd Edges 15 and 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein. Verse 15, for the sword and their destruction draw it nigh. One people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in the hand. And we're seeing that right now. All right, we're seeing Russia and Ukraine. We're seeing America, Israel, and also Iran at war. We are seeing Taiwan and China in preparation of war, and we're seeing a lot of countries, some that are basically on the internet where you've seen the broadcast, and some that they don't have broadcast with. All right, that's basically going on right now. All right, and also this is going